Hello, and welcome to Jay on the Spectrum, where I, Jordan White, talk about my experiences as an autistic person living in a world built for neurotypical people. Well, the last episode, I was able to talk about how I really enjoyed animation, and and I had the special guest star, the Land Before Time director, well, at least one of the producers of the film, John Pomeroy. This time it's a cult film. It's rather strange, but I have a tendency to be like, I want to try to find the most obscure, most rare, some of the most cultish of all animations. Well, this one is unique because it had this a little obscurity, or whatever you want to call it, had the potential to like change animation, well, the way it was made. But it didn't seem to go out as well as it wanted to. So, but somehow the film got made anyway. I'm pretty sure some of you may have heard of it. It's called The Brave Little Toaster. And today we have the film's director, who's going to be on the call with us here shortly. His name is Gary Rees. We already talked last year when we were covering the Space Jam film, and Sarah's going to be back, the person you saw last time, and Julia's also going to be back. I'm pretty sure she's going to come in, but let's just bring in the crowd. All right.
I will turn on my camera here. Hello.
Hey, Jerry. Welcome back to
Hi.
Hey,
Jordan. It's good to see you.
Hey. Oh, Sarah's here.
Yes. Tracy and Julia are joining us today.
Can you hear me?
Her name's Sarah.
Hi, Tracy.
I haven't really gotten over to Julia yet. Just I was just making my little introduction before I brought you into
Sure.
little podcast type thing. And this is like the first time I really have a director of a film, albeit obscure. We're just coldish, as if I was trying to search for every single animated film that's really ever been made, even going back as far back as The Adventures of Prince Ahmed from 1926. You can't believe.
Oh, wow.
That far. I mean, it's like, that's the oldest, that they ain't getting any older than that. But
yes.
But by this time,
Is Julie coming?
hang on. We ended up watching this via an archive.org link. It was not available to stream anywhere. It's not available to purchase on VOD anywhere. It never made a jump to Blu-ray. It's just DVD on his Amazon. I assume Disney has the film printer negatives or high-def copies of this film locked away somewhere. Would you petition for this film to be remastered and put on Disney Plus or something?
It's not, Disney never had the theatrical rights. They only had cable and home video rights. And so Hyperion, the original producers, kept theatrical and merchandising. And then the timing on the Disney Channel killed our theatrical. So we only played in a few theaters because Disney Channel chucked it on early. And as far as the rights now, as far as I know, the last person to buy them away from the four producers that were on the film with me was Waterman Entertainment. So I think theatrical issues all belong to Waterman Entertainment, not Disney.
Waterman.
Yeah, Waterman Entertainment.
Oh, Waterman. Okay. So, all right, let's go ahead.
That was a few years ago. Yeah. Okay.
So let's go ahead and get ourselves started. This film is based on a small novella by a guy named Thomas Disch. And while he was at Disney, John Lasseter noticed the lack of quality in the animated feature film The Fox and the Hound, and saw Tron, which I know you worked on, was some of the first CG effects in cinema history, with moving dynamic backgrounds. And he was like, why can't our animated films have that kind of dynamic motion in the backgrounds? So an in-house test was created combining CG backgrounds with 2D animation based on where the wild things are, intended to be a bigger pitch to get a whole movie like this off the ground.
Jordan, are you reciting the Pixar story, or are we talking about the Brave Little Toaster?
Well,
Yes.
actually, I have a little piece of history that I can inform you about that move from Tron to the Wild Things test, which many people don't know. But anyway, continue, and when it's time, I'll fill that in.
Selecting the Brave Little Toaster as the story, John developed this film to be a big, cutting-edge animated feature with CG backgrounds and 2D animated characters. However, after seeing what John created, the people at Disney were like, very good, you're out of here. So it was a rough time for John, who ended up with Pixar, with a team envisioning to create the first CG animated feature, which became Toy Story. But despite the Brave Little Toaster's initial failure to suddenly convince Disney to make the movie, the question is, how did it get made anyway?
Yes. Well, I developed, wrote, and directed it. That's how it got made. But the Tom Wilhite took it outside of Disney so it could be made independently. And just to go back for a moment, the Tron and CG animation and the dream to do it for the Brave Little Toaster. Actually, there was something that preceded that in that gap there. In 1981, while I was still working on Tron, Brad Bird and me and a number of other people had a dream of making Will Eisner's The Spirit comic book into a big animated feature. And I actually have the letter, it's posted on my website, where we approached Gary Kurtz, who was the producer of American Graffiti and Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, right? We approached him to see if he would back our Spirit animated feature. And I was proposing doing exactly that, the computer animation background and actually digital ink and paint. My system was called COPS, Computer Oriented Production System. Years later, Disney did CAPS, Computer Animation Production System.
Sounds familiar.
So in 81, 82, I was pushing that. And Gary Kurtz actually flew me to meet with Phil Middleman, who ran Magi Synthavision. And I was still working with him on Tron. They were doing shots for us on Tron. And I was one of two computer image choreographers on the film. Bill Croyer and I split the duty. So all computer graphics scenes went through me and through Bill Croyer. So Gary Kurtz understood that I wanted to combine the dynamics of the dimensional computer backgrounds and the 2D animated characters. He understood that. And he flew me to meet with Phil Middleman to pitch that. And Phil said, that could be done. Nobody's doing it yet, but yes, that could be done. And so we were proposing in 1982, before the Wild Things test, that The Spirit, with Gary Kurtz producing and Brad Bird directing and me co-writing, would be the first combination hand-drawn and CG background film ever done. So we were excited about that. And then Phil was visiting Disney, and I actually had a dear friend of mine, Randy Cartwright, come running down into our trailer where we were working on, still finishing up Tron. And he said, oh my God, Phil Middleman is spilling all the beans to John Lasseter up on the third floor right now. And I said, what? So I went running upstairs and I ran into Phil in the hallway and I said, what are you doing? Like, you're telling our plans that was confidential. And he said, oh, did you mean to keep it secret? And I said, yes, that's why Gary Kurtz paid me to come meet with you. Brad and I had met in secret and we're proposing that they do that. So anyway, so John and Glenn Keane, and we loved them, but they didn't even know that he had spilled our secrets. So actually The Spirit with Gary Kurtz producing was going to be the first combination of those technologies. But as history knows it right now, the Wild Things test appears to be the first thing that was on the board, but it was actually the first test that was done by Disney, but it was number 2 in line for the dream. So I still have the production. History. So yeah, on my website, you can find a section called Before Caps, and it has the letter to Gary Kurtz in December of 1981 discussing this, and it has all the plans that I drew up to discuss the combination of those elements in my COPS system, which later became cap system at Disney the way Disney did it. So anyway, there a lot of us were pushing for those dreams, those goals early on. So we were hoping the Spirit would be the first one, and I know John was hoping that his version of the Brave Little Toaster would be the first one. But we were all stampeding for that first dream of combining the great dynamics that you could get inside three-dimensional moving backgrounds. And I actually, by the way, went up to Lucasfilm before there was a Pixar and met with Ed Catmull and Alvy Ray Smith. And this was with Gary Kurtz introducing me. And they were just doing Andre and Wally B at the time with Lasseter. They were experimenting. And this was pre-Pixar. And so Gary also had me sit down with them and discuss this dream of combining the analog and the digital worlds. And they said the same thing that Phil Middleman said. They said, well, nobody's doing that yet, but it could be done not years in the future, maybe a number of months in the future if people really worked hard on it. But they said, George Lucas has given us a very strict mandate. He wants us to do only pure synth imagery. And what you're proposing is to take hand-drawn art and digitize it, and hand paintings and digital paintings, and be able to map them over three-dimensional backgrounds, or do 2D multiplane. You're trying to do like Grand Central Station of all art, digital and analog, meeting in one place. That's a great dream, but that's not George's dream. George wants to do pure synthetic with no analog being brought in. So we can't help you with that, but it's great, and good luck with that, because it could work. So we had gotten encouragement from Ed Catmull and Alvy Ray Smith at Lucas, and from Phil Middleman over at Magi Synthavision. And it just so happened that, Phil let the secret out, and I love Glenn and love John. And so they actually got to play with it early on. But while they were doing that, we were also doing image tests for the Spirit, which we were still hoping to get off the ground. So the same people that were rendering the Wild Things test for Disney were also rendering images of the Spirit and his romantic interests, sans serif and people like that in their system. So anyway, but so that was part of the preamble to that you brought up about the dream of having Toaster tackle that sort of technology combo. So we were all stampeding toward that. But I should say that I got the call about the potential of developing and directing the Brave Little Toaster after Gary Kurtz had taken Brad Bird and I under his wing. We did actually a pencil test for the Spirit feature. It was a trailer of coming attractions. It's somewhere out there on YouTube. Somebody posted it. So actually people like John Musker and Harry Sabin and Daryl Rooney and Glenn Keane and a whole bunch of people pitched in, and Daryl Van Sitters, did pencil test animation for our coming attractions for the Spirit big feature. And Gary loved it. He understood. I know, Jordan, you're passionate about this. Gary totally understood that it would be for all audiences, because he had just produced Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, and he felt like the Spirit animated feature would be for the same audience, a big all-age audience, not kids, not like a babysitter film. Kids were welcome to see it, but it wouldn't be made for kids. It would be made for everyone. So he understood that, and he paid to move Brad Bird and I up to Northern California from Los Angeles for him to just pay us to develop the Spirit. So we got the script written, we got about 80% storyboarded. And so between Brad and I, we storyboarded almost the entire feature.
Wow.
And but ultimately, he couldn't quite get people to believe in it at the time. This was in like 82, 83, 84. We were telling the world that animation could break $100 million at the box office, which was a crazy notion back then, but we all believed in it. And when we had studios tell us, oh, we love your script, we'd love to do this movie. And then they'd find out it was animated and go, oh, why would you do that? Animation is for kids. And we go, no, it isn't. You like the script, that's what's going to be on the screen. That's the movie. Oh. So anyway, we couldn't quite get traction. And Gary, at the time, was going through some financial difficulties. So I went ahead and resigned from that situation, and Brad did too. And I said, Gary, I know you could use one less check to write every week, because you're paying us every week and waiting for the film to happen. If it happens, I'm right back here with you. But in the meantime, I'll free up some of your money. So as soon as I let my friends know that I was had resigned from Gary's situation, and that was after like a 3-year run with Gary Kurtz, which was wonderful. God, he was our angel. But as soon as I let people know I was free, I got a call from Tom Wilhite down in LA, and he said, "You have to fly down and meet with me." So I did, and he showed me Thomas Tisch's novella, and he said, "Here's this novella. It's called The Brave Little Toaster." We were seeing if we could get it made at Disney. Lasseter was attached to it at the beginning, but people kept telling me that that's a nice short film, but that's not a feature. It's like little inanimate objects and it's cute and everything. So why don't you make a short? That's not a feature. So he said, I believe it could be a feature if it's in the right hands. And I like the way you develop story. So I know you've been trying to get this Spirit made and you're like raring to go to make a movie. And it's like for years you've been trying to do that. And now I can let you do that. I need somebody to develop and to write and to direct this movie. And the first thing you have to do is make it earn being a feature, because everybody's still, with all the development that's gone at Disney with the, you know, the little team that was there, people still think of it as a short. So number one is make it earn being a feature, and then write and direct it. And so, but I can't give you much money. So he had very little to pay, and the whole film was a $2.25 million budget for a 90-minute feature. So now you have to remember at the time that Care Bears was about 6 or 7 million, right? And Bluth was doing films about 12 million, and Disney was in the mid $25 million budget range. So we were definitely the cheapest thing going. But and actually we had some people say to us, well, you know, it's a job, just plan it and send it overseas, and there'll be a film will come back for kids and be done with it. And all of us were like, no, we're trying to make movies. We had gone to see Star Wars in '77, and we're going, we want to make movies like that. And back in the day when Walt and his team made Snow White, they were as disruptive as Star Wars. I mean, that was a big thing, an animated feature for adults and kids, for the whole family. When Snow White was made, that was revolutionary. So, you know, we wanted to be revolutionary too. And granted, it was a little budget and a title that made everybody think it was a kid's movie, but we wanted to earn our place with like Spielberg and Coppola and Lucas, and to be those sort of filmmakers. So I just went, darn it, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to just be my best filmmaker self with this tiny budget. And we had a crew of wonderfully creative people. And I've started with the people that were going to work with Lasseter, with Joe Rampt and Brian McEntee. And so they came on board. And so I started going through reshaping the story and adding characters, and then defining characters and doing a bunch of stuff with them. But the crew that came along, like Kevin Lima and Kirk Wise and Randy Cartwright and Alex Mann and Daryl Rooney and on, it was all these people that were so gifted, and they were all in their 20s by and large, and were either just out of college or just had a couple of years of work under their belts. And they didn't want to just do a job and make a check and earn a living. They wanted to care about a movie and make something they'd be proud of later on. They could look back on it and be proud of it. So it was just great to get a collection of people like that around, where everybody was trying to make something that would last. And the challenge of that, though, when you had the tiny budget and the intense schedule, was so tough. And every day, people like Kevin and Randy would have to do as much animation in one day that they would normally do in 2 weeks at Disney. So imagine that, where somebody comes to you and says, you know, the work you're planning for the next 2 weeks, it all has to be done by the end of today. Like that's pretty intense. So under those conditions, people were still really willing to give it their best. And I'll come back and discuss more of this in detail with you as questions come up. But we did 6 months prep here, and then I moved with a core team of about a dozen people, where we all went over to Taiwan and worked with the wonderful people over at Cuckoo's Nest, James Wong's company. And by the way, they had worked with us on Tron before that. They were doing helping with all the cells that went into the many layers that would be exposed for the Tron Live actors. So I was continuing with them. And then another 6 months after I got back of post-production with the, all the music and sound effects and mix and all of that sort of thing. So it was a year and a half of what wound up being the most creative freedom I've ever had, where there was no studio, because we were independent, there was no studio giving us notes. And Tom Wilhite and the rest of the producers really respected our creative space. So, we didn't have a bunch of people poking and saying, well, I wouldn't do it this way, I'd do the shot that way or whatever. It was just, they gave us freedom. So it was so satisfying. And getting to work with just amazing voice people. I practically rated the Groundlings Improv Theater for my actors. And so that was fun. But if you'd like to see for a moment, I can play the first pencil test animation we did to just see, like, how does a toaster walk? How does a lamp express itself when it's got no arms or legs? And like, how would it do that? Well, Rebecca Rees, who actually we met at Disney, we're still a couple where we got married after meeting at Disney. But she did the work on Lampy. You'll see I put everybody's name on the little pencil test, so you see who did what.
Cool.
But she figured out using the plug, like the cord and the plug, to be like his little hand, so he could look around and he could gesture and things with just his plug, and no fingers or hands or anything. Just use the actual appliance shape. So would you like me to try sharing that? And
Oh, go ahead.
okay, I will see if I can make this work. All right. And you'll hear music from the score during this. So it's a couple minutes long. Okay.
This is gonna
There
be
we
like,
go. There we go.
Shoot this out for YouTube or something.
Here you go. We really had to stretch that little fake light radio. That's Rebecca's animation. Here's some of her stuff on Lampy, using the little plug, looking around. Steve Moore's animation, toaster peeking. Nice little waddle. Whoa, a scared toaster. Oh, I love this little waddle. Blanky, Steve Morgan. Waking up in the morning, little yawn.
There's mistakes. Turns out Julia got kicked out, and I had to get her back in. Sorry about that.
Going along like a little inchworm. Oh, Kirk Wise. Vacuuming up stuff on the carpet, rolling away, and then it's plugged. Boop. He has to waddle back and plug himself in again. Let's keep working. Kevin Lima did this. It's a little replacement bulb in. Gets back to reading.
Some of these shots actually made in film.
And Rebecca and Kevin did a couple scenes together. Rob and Chris. It's just Elmo St. Peter. and that was Ernie from the junkyard. So anyway, that gives you an idea of the first experiment.
The film didn't have Ernie in a junkyard, but now all of a sudden, boom, you end up kind of including him, but he kind of was cut out. So that's kind of interesting to know.
Yeah, well, this, during the test animation phase, before we did all the storyboarding and worked out all the details and everything, we were just trying to figure out how to move everybody. And so the first test it's called experimental animation, just figuring out how they should move. Once that was done, and once we'd established some things that were working, then all the other animators working on it could use that as a guide and see, oh, this is how Lampy would hop around, and this is how it would use its cord. And then people could use that principle and think up other solutions at the time, but at least they had a foundation for how an appliance could emote,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because when other people have talked to us too, people will watch videos of an animal, how it walks, and study it. But what were you guys supposed to do? You don't have any videos of lamps walking.
You're exactly right, Julia. It's funny. I for 5 years, I was an executive R&D Imagineer dealing with emerging technologies. And I actually had a toaster screening and discussion, and Dan Oliver, who voiced Toaster, came by and was with us during that discussion. But that's how I started my talk. I said, where do you go to find deep data on how a toaster moves when it's feeling depressed? And I went, nowhere. There's no such data dump.
No.
You have to make it up. So you have to experiment and come up with all of that stuff. And there were so many inventive things, like for Blanky, like his little inchworm crawl and yawning and stretching like a little part of the blanket that looked like an arm. And there was a rich library then of experimental animation. So then when the extreme schedule hit us with having to animate so much every day, at least there was like a really good guide.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh,
that's cool. It's cool to see it.
Certainly it doesn't look like there was any micromanagement, and despite the tough schedule, it certainly looks like there wasn't any micromanagement. So I think that's supposed to be a good thing.
Yes, it was very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So several people who worked on this production ended up working at Pixar and making Pixar a game-changing animation studio during the early days when it was still an offshoot of Lucasfilm and ILM. I know Joe Ranft was one who's no longer with us, unfortunately. Can you name any?
Yes, and I gave him his first voice acting role in this film. He voiced Elmo St. Peter's, the guy in the parts shop. He had a major role in this.
Oh,
so and I just
the guy with the big old monster truck.
Yeah, exactly. And Joe was first doing story work with me, and then there were 4 of us doing storyboards. I had Joe being one of those people, and I was one, and Joe Rooney and Alex Mann, the 4 of us boarded the entire movie. And then I moved Joe from story to storyboard, and then I also gave him co-writing credit at the end because I felt like he contributed enough. I wanted to share that credit with him, so I added him to the screen, co-writing the screenplay ultimately. And then he wound up being a animator and also a voice of Elmo St. Peter's. So he had many roles, and that happened quite a few times with our people that worked on the film. They rarely had 1 credit, usually had 2, 3, or 4 credits. So he had a major acting role.
So it's like you Elmo St. Peter, you pretty much spoofed St. Elmo's Fire, and then there were other spoofs I recognize during the nature scene. You have an opera musical style MGM Esther Williams, Eat Your Heart Out, Esther Williams.
Yeah, like Busby Berkeley invades the meadow.
Definitely, yeah.
And these were, by the way, storyboards. So that's an original storyboard of the little characters where they're going, but he loved us. So you have the radio and the lamp and the little blankie. And then
that's cool.
Vacuum says, so what? He's got a family.
Well, actually, that's the AC. And that's another one of those.
Yes, the air conditioner. And then while he continues to talk, Blanky is looking at the little picture of the master, and then and then hugs it. So that's how the storyboards looked for the entire film.
Oh, wow.
So we kept them really rough like that. So those were some of my boards, and there were, like I said, there were 4 of us boarding. And I have a page on my website where you can see the storyboards on one side and then the final finished film frame on the right side. And it's so faithful. We just really stuck to the plan at the moment it was boarded, and I signed off on it in the reel. We really stuck to it and didn't change or alter or wander around. So we kept our plan.
Okay, nice. So a lot of ideas I noticed were used in the Toy Story movies were first used in this film. Only there's a lot more death in this film than quote unquote death in this film, the Toy Story movies. The AC is a fatality. Lampy nearly destroys himself, becoming a semiconductor to supercharge the battery with 1.21 gigawatts of electricity.
Yes.
Who gets drowned in a mud bog, and Toaster sacrifices himself to save his owner. Not to mention the creepy clown in Toaster's dream about him going to hell. Do you think the Brave Little Toaster had a big influence on the saga of Toy Story, or do you think what I'm saying is just totally wrong?
I think it likely did. And the interesting thing is most of those story elements were not there when I arrived. So from the book and the previous development at Disney, there was no young master. There was an adult who had abandoned them, and they in the book, I don't think they even get completely reunited. They wind up with somebody else at the end. So I introduced the idea of a family, but the appliances have really bonded with the child, with the kid, because the kid is playing with him. I imagined him putting like launching things out of the slot and, playing games with the characters and riding around when he was a little tiny, probably riding on the vacuum while the mom and dad vacuumed and stuff. So I went, well, so that was a new story idea. What if they really bonded with the kid and thought of the kid as their master? And then when they finally go on their trip and are reunited, you see that he's grown, so that you understand the passage of time. So that was a new thing that didn't pre-exist. And then also there was Brian McEntee, in doing art direction, had done this amazing scene, and it pulled it from, I believe that was something that they had gone through in the novella, was a junkyard, but it was partway through the story. It was not the big finale at all. It was partway through the story, and they survive and they continue on their journey. So as soon as I looked at his art, I just went, oh my gosh, that's the graveyard for appliances. That's not something along the way. That's where you end up at the final moment. And you either make it or don't, and you wind up in that grave or you escape. So I took that off the boards in the middle of the film and put it at the end, and then went, okay, now we have a big threat at the end of the movie. Do they wind up in the junkyard? And then like the compactor and the electromagnet became a thing. And so that whole thing of like the guy coming to the junkyard to look for his appliances, which he thinks are stolen, that whole thing of missing them, like none of that was in the original book or the story at Disney. And to then have the master get pulled up onto the conveyor belt and be in danger of actually being crushed if the toaster wouldn't leap in, like none of that. There was no big moment where the toaster saved its owner's life. So that was a new thing that I put in the film as well. So a lot of those things that you associate with the emotional tug of the movie were new elements that were added that were not there in the book or the Disney development days. And then with Joe and Brian McEntee and myself, we sat and went through also development of characters which hadn't been done yet. So figuring out what makes each one tick, so it actually became like the way to unlock the writing of it once we really defined who they were. And so for example, it might seem kind of obvious now, but the toaster I thought of as warm, obviously a warm character, and that other characters see themselves reflected in the toaster, so they feel more comfortable with it. And the lamp is he thinks of himself as very bright, but is a little bit dim. So that made him work as a character. And Blanky, I thought of him as a security blanket. So now that we had a kid in the story for the first time, I thought, well, the Blanky character was probably the child's blanket that they would use to keep him warm at night, or if he got a little cold, they put Vicks on his chest and lay the warm, electric blanket on him or something. So I went, well, you'd probably think of it as a security blanket then. But without the child, it's an insecurity blanket. So everything is insecure about it because it doesn't have the child with it. And then with the vacuum, it's manufactured to hold things inside. So I went, what if emotionally he holds everything inside? And it eventually has like a nervous breakdown because he's held everything inside for too long, and they have to wrestle him to the ground because he's going nuts near the waterfall. And with the radio, John Lovitz, when he was auditioning for me, was just all over the map with wonderful things he was thinking of, like the live from Ebbets Field, and he's doing the broadcast from the baseball diamond and all that stuff. And he would just had these old things that he loved to reference. And I went, great. You're the old time radio, and you're the ultimate announcer of old broadcasts and old stories from the radio, old time radio, and sports and all that stuff. So I really brought a lot of that stuff into the radio, where he's just constantly wants to be the entertainer because he's the one that's broadcasting entertainment to the world. So as soon as we put all those elements together, then it was much easier to write the dynamics of an ensemble scene, because you knew how each one would feel about what was going on at the moment. And the last one to get into place was the air conditioner, because we didn't really have a take on that. I should let you know too that while we were storyboarding, Tom Wilhite was trying to raise more money for us, so we'd have a little bit more. And actually, the 2 1/4 was after he stacked all the piles of pennies together, and then we had 2 1/4 million by the end. But he would let us know occasionally, there's somebody coming by and they might invest in the film. Can you put on a little show for them? So Joe and I would take turns pitching the storyboards. So we'd have them pinned up on a board that was about 4 feet by 8 feet long, and a whole bunch of storyboards pinned up with little dialogue stuff written underneath each one. And so we'd tag team, where I'd get in front of the board and I would tell the story, and then I would push it aside, and then Joe would come in and he'd tell that board, and then he'd push it aside, and I'd come in with the third one, and we would take them through a section of the story and just try to get them excited about it. And whenever we got to the air conditioner part, it was just kind of an angry character, and we had just general stuff it might say. It wasn't really a script yet, but he was just like, he was just angry. So one day, but we used to just have fun together and goof off. So we started doing kind of a Nicholson thing one day, and we were just like, oh, that's kind of funny. So then we just did it to goof off when somebody was there for the pitch, and kind of talked like that for the air conditioner. So then I suddenly had a click in my head where I went, oh my gosh, who's more cool than Nicholson? So that takes care of the air conditioner cool part. And he's kind of above everybody else. And he's that way in the wall. He's stuck in the wall above everyone else. So he kind of feels above them, but feels left out because he doesn't get to connect with them when they're playing, when the kid's little. So I went, oh my gosh, that's for the first time I have an angle on that character. I went and locked the door and just wrote that entire air conditioner scene from the time that Blanky's crying on the top of the stairs all the way until the air conditioner is blown out and Vacuum says, oh, he was a jerk anyway. That whole thing just was one writing session straight through. And it's like, but finding the voice of the character mattered first. Like I couldn't write that until we figured out who the character was. So that was a big thing. And then the next thing was, who do you have speak these roles? Because you can write that, but then depending on what actor you bring in, it's very different experience. So, I wound up having, like taking several pages I'd written and brought in a number of voice people at the time, and they read through, and it just was, it was so depressing just hearing these pages that I'd written that I thought were good. And then when they would talk like that and make it funny, it was like, oh gosh, now it's not funny. It's not interesting. And I feel like I wrote it better than that. I know it sounded better than that in my head. So then Joe Ramp said, I've been taking classes at the Groundlings Improv Theater just to try to get my acting game up as an animator. And they have some cool people over there. Maybe we should go look there. And I said, yep, let's go do that. So I went and watched some shows, and that's when I got to meet Deanna Oliver and John Lovitz and Phil Hartman and Mindy Sterling and Judy Toll. And so, and Tim Stack. And so we practically raided the Groundlings Improv Theater. And once they came in and they were reading, just everything sounded as I had hoped it would sound. And they would plus it and make it great. And I think it was for this reason that when people would first walk in and see that it was this sort of crazy idea of household appliances with voices and feelings and going on an incredible journey, kind of like a spoof on the incredible journey with animals, with the dogs and the cat, you know, and they would feel like it was their job to make it sound novel and wild and cuckoo. So they would try to add to the crazy sound, and that wasn't working. What I needed was for people to believe in the characters. So when I went to the Groundlings, I found out that what they went through was exactly what I needed, where they would have audience members. They'd say to the audience, like, somebody come up with a location. Somebody goes, bus stop. Somebody goes, okay, bus, you're at a bus stop. Okay, what is she? And somebody go, a radish. Okay, you're a radish at the bus stop. What's he? A stalk of celery. Okay, now the two of you meet at a bus stop and you fall in love. So they would have to take that crazy situation, and they weren't looking to make it crazier. It's already crazy. What they had to find was how to make it believable. How would you believe that a stalk of celery and a radish could fall in love? And so they had to find what was believable and relatable to everybody in the room, right? So when they took a look at the toaster and they'd go like, well, yeah, the toaster has a sense of duty and it wants to make golden brown toast. And when it can't do that, it feels unfulfilled. And, you know, when when the vacuum holds things in, it starts to get very tense and has a nervous breakdown. And they would relate to that as real, believable stuff that was sort of a metaphor for human emotions. And then it really unlocked the voice take on it. And so once we had established who the characters were and then found their voices, then it was golden. That was just a dream.
Oh yeah, definitely it was.
And Thurl Ravenscroft for the
Thurl
vacuum,
Ravenscroft,
one of the best voices ever.
Best known for being the voice of Tony the Tiger and singing "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch." And much like the Grinch, this film is not afraid to make a statement on the flawed concept of consumerist yuppie culture where people want you to have stuff to be happy at the expense of others, while anything as old is better off dead. Essentially, it's zero waste before zero waste became a thing. Did you prefer that to be the intention of the story when you and Joe ran for writing a script? Because money can't buy you happiness.
Yeah, I definitely was trying to talk, and it's a good metaphor for people too. You like, these appliances would hate to have their warranty run out, and they hate to be last year's model and be replaced with the new flashier thing, right? So I think that's a fear. We don't want our friends to find somebody new and replace us with the new friend, and we don't want to get, as we get older, to have people think we're irrelevant. So, you know, I felt like there was so much in the life of an appliance that we could relate to. And so, yeah, I wanted them to stand for having lasting value and to treasure things from the past and to carry them on and value them, and sort of a healthy sense of nostalgia. And so, yeah, I definitely meant all of that, and worked with Van Dyke Parks on the song more, everything you wanted and more. I always felt like that was such an odd phrase, and I see that in ads all the time where it says everything you want and more, and I'd go, well, if it's everything I want, what's the more part that you're stacking on it? Like, is that the part that I don't want? Because it's more than I want. But that gluttony, the feeling that you have to have more and more and more stuff, I took to be sort of the antithesis of what our character stood for. And, you know, they don't know when they arrive at finally to be reunited with the master, how he's going to feel. And the fact that he has family memories associated with being at the cottage for summers when he was a kid and playing with all of those appliances. And, you know, when he reads a book, the little lamp is always there with him and all of that. And, you know, the fact that he treasures them partly because they represent his childhood and a fun time with his family. So they realize that they are still valued in their own master's eyes. So that was a nice thing. So yes, I definitely intended all those emotional layers to be there.
Yeah, because the 80s was like the big yuppie consumerist culturist weird thing that and now we're trying to break away from that. Well, look at the big trend. You probably don't have to know too much about it. Just open a Twitter feed or a social media feed. You'll probably see all the information coming out of Washington and other places, and the people who probably don't want to feel like they're losing against what you call people who are rich. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but that's kind of what I get from that. Okay, so
yes, rampant consumerism.
Consumerism.
Well, and you know what? That's even more relevant now, because we have things like our phones. You know, something like a toaster might feel like it's become irrelevant and be replaced with the new model in about maybe 4 or 5 years. But a phone, it has to be worried that it's going to be replaced in 6 months.
Well,
like,
I've
and people just toss it
for 3 years, nearly
yes,
4 years. Look at it; it's still going.
I did that too. I got this 13 about the beginning of this year. I had a 6S until then. I held on to that for years.
Wow.
I went for all the way from a 6S suddenly to a 13. So I held on
to your values.
Going off that.
Hey, all right. Clicking.
Oh, definitely. Okay, so. Well,
and by the way,
we already talked about the.
This is the sound of Lampy's head, by the way.
Really?
So all of the sounds in the film, I had done by the Foley method. So we didn't get a sound library stuff. We would make the sound. So here, when the Lampy laid his head down, it'd say, "Go find your own place to sleep, you little fuzzball."
Well,
so that's the sound. It's just a lid that was in our kitchen, and I was searching all over Los Angeles for the right sounds. It was actually pretty funny. We were going around with the team from Porta Sound, it was called, editorial, and we were going all around Los Angeles to like secondhand stores and stuff with a pencil and tapping things. Oh, by the way, that's Rebecca, who worked on the Brave Little Toaster. She was a directing animator. There she is.
Oh, Becca.
Anyway, I would go around to the store and be going, tapping things, and and the salespeople would come over and go, What are you doing? What are you doing? And we said, well, we're trying to find a lamp that sounds right. And they're like, what? We said, well, we're making a film and we're doing sound effects, and I don't care if the lamp has a good light in it, but I need to like bend the neck and see if it squeaks right, and I need to hit the head. And so we found all the other sounds, but I could not find that a little bit stupid sound for Lampy's head until I found this. And then I went, yep, that's the little bit empty. The little bit empty head.
I already heard the first time, but the 2 times you pushed it out, I mean, it didn't go off.
Maybe it has a filter cutoff. Some of these things have a filter cutoff. Let me go in and see.
Yeah, try moving it closer to the microphone.
Let me go here into my preferences, into audio. Let me see. Oh, okay. Suppress background noise. Okay, I'm gonna turn that off. Okay, I'm gonna try turning that off and see if that works. Okay, now see if it can work. Well, no wonder it was frustrating for you. You couldn't hear it. See if you can hear this.
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Yeah, I had the sound suppression on for background noise, but that's Lampy's little head. So
okay, nice. That's awesome.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. I'm glad you told me you couldn't hear it before. So
that's so turn that audio suppression thing back on. So, all right. I already told you on the messenger about animation having a rather rough year, and the Oscars, Netflix, Warner Brothers Discovery being the big offenders. Of course, my question would, what the heck happened to Julia?
Oh, she gave a little note that she had to jump off, and she waved goodbye. So that was
Okay.
a planned exit.
All right. So, how could practicing animation line chops when I'm not developing software for other people be worth it, considering the rough waters ahead? Especially since I'm an autistic person and not neurotypical like you. This applies to every career, including both animation and software development.
Well, I think there's so much development going on in animation, all different kinds of animation. And I think there's so many different kinds of people that work together. And there's so much telecommuting happening with people working from their homes or different boutique-sized studios, that I think the need to have everybody go into one big office and work together in that setting is no longer as much of a thing. So I think there's more space for individual people with skills to find a way to contribute and fit in from wherever they are. So I remain very optimistic that that can be the case.
I'm a software engineer by trade. I'm told by Dad, hey, you got worked on getting better at it. Once the things come in, you start to get better at it. Of course, in the old days with animation, it was either go big or go home. Now you can go big at home, but you still need skill.
That's a good way to say it.
I wonder how that makes you feel, like now you can go big at home.
It's exciting. It's I did a project a few years ago where I needed a big presentation, and I was able to do, before it was popular, did work from my home, and Andy Gaskill, who's an amazing artist and art director. He was at Disney for years, art directed Lion King, and he's at Sony, I believe, these days. But it's just one of the major art directors out there. He was able to moonlight with me on the project because we were doing it all through the computer. But this was years ago, before anybody was really doing that. And I collaborated with people in San Francisco, and together we were able to put together a presentation where I could walk into a room with a big screen and a controller and do kind of the Steve Jobs thing of walking around in front of the giant screen with the storytelling. And it was over 400 pieces of art that we did. And it was my art and Andy Gaskell's art and John Puglisi's art. And together we had this really fun presentation. And if I had tried to make them quit their jobs and come to one studio and work together, we couldn't even have done it. So we were more productive because we could do big, ambitious dreams all in our separate homes. So if I needed to work from late in the evening until the early hours of the morning and send files at like 2 a.m. or something, I could do that. And then somebody else who was an early riser could get up at 6 a.m. and they'd have all my stuff waiting for them. And then they could work in the morning while I slept in. And so we could all have independent schedules, but really work together and kind of optimize our output. And we wound up with a nice big presentation, but it was because of telecommuting. And so when it came along during the pandemic that suddenly many people were doing it, I felt so comfortable with that because I'd already been doing it effectively with other teams, small teams.
Well, me and Sarah do the telecommute type thing all the time. In my last job, I was telecommute, but right now I'm in between jobs. I'm trying to get myself to be telecommute. I do have like an interview except I'd been there's the Julia thing. So I am interviewing for a company that's right in between the two homes where I am.
Yeah.
Or at least one in Kennesaw, and the other is where my parents bought a second house in Blairsville, and it's like in a sweet spot right in between there. So
right.
So I could get to work remote. So I feel like it would work, and like the skills required would be HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, MySQL, and WordPress. Last job I had experience working with WordPress.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. It sounds like you have a broad range.
Of course, I know how to write and produce animation, but I can't like do the art or draw. But if you want us, Eric Goldberg already saw my Roaring Bear short where I had Sarah do the animation for the first part and I had another guy do the animation for the second part. And if you want to see it, you can, but it's not like 100% finished or ready for distribution. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm used to looking at so many things work in progress. That's how I see most stuff is work in progress.
Yeah.
It's only at the very end that you get everything looking pretty. But I'll tell you, that was one of the most important things that Eric Larson taught me when I was mentoring with him back even before the CalArts program was created. And I was in my teens and I was still in high school, and somebody had given me the phone number, and I called the phone number and talked to the people at Disney Feature Animation, and they had my dad drive me down to meet them. And so they gave me a desk where I could come during breaks from high school and have Eric Larson mentor me. And he was one of Walt's 9 old men. He was amazing.
Yeah.
And he taught, one of the most important things he taught me was to work rough, because I was doing all these very careful drawings. And on the one hand, people would praise them for being very quote unquote on model. It looked very much like the final characters. And I thought that's how they worked. I didn't know any better. And he said, no. When you're starting out, you have to work very rough and just get the idea to come alive. He said, if you make every drawing pretty, you're going to fall in love with a bad scene, because you're not going to have the acting working yet, but you're going to have all these pretty drawings you don't want to throw away. So he goes, don't draw pretty, draw rough, work out the idea and like throw things away and try again and make it better and better acting. Once you get the acting really working underneath of it, rough, then you can make pretty drawings on top of that. So working rough is I have fallen in love with.
Wow.
I've worked on like the acting motions before the lip syncing with the graphics is, and that's why I talk about like the experimental animations for like the computer graphics.
Yeah. So you gotta get the inner self working, and then you can work on the outer appearance.
I mean, I could do rough code, but of course, after I did learn to do rough code in my career, but afterwards, I just had to clean up. I did that when I was working at one of my jobs. Of course, one of the things that is still part of the problem with me being autistic is that I tend to not develop certain skills as quickly as others.
Right.
That in turn causes a few problems, but not like excessively dangerous problems, but more like little inconveniences that
right, that
other people might not get. Of course, during this period where I don't really have a career, just because the last job I had was not a good fit, and took a break, and now I'm looking again.
Right.
Part of that, what I'm doing is to learn good work habits, and such a habit would be putting your phone in the bedroom, which I probably can do once I start work on this little freelance thing I have.
Yes, it cut down on distractions.
And of course, don't have any junky tabs open. That's one thing Dad's been teaching me. And of course,
right.
Yeah, that's one thing my dad doesn't do. And I should know, I'm borrowing his computer.
Okay, nice. So I'm gonna make sure that I want to make sure I do super well in my next job. So I just if you
thought you were gonna like digitize video tapes or set up.
I've been doing that. I've got a little freelance gig for a web design for a client that I'm just waiting for the go ahead. You know,
right.
It's interesting. So yes, I'm glad that you were able to join along with us and discuss this cult classic, oddball, somewhat
Yes.
obscurity, but I still remembered because if I had been for the Disney Masterpiece Collection VHS bumpers that before the movie starts that you see a trailer for this film, I wouldn't have gotten to know about it to begin with.
Well, you know, it's one of those things that it had to be discovered. When we were making it, we dreamed of it going into the theaters and having a big release, and it was going to. Actually, at Sundance Film Festival in early '88, we had a couple screenings, and I took it there for the Sundance Festival. And a couple of the judges approached me and said, we've been having discussions behind closed doors as far as our judging and prizes that are going out. And most of us agree that you have the best feature here this year, not best animated feature, best feature. But they said, if a cartoon wins at Sundance Film Festival, we're worried that people won't take our festival so seriously. So we're going to give it to somebody else. But just so you know, we think you have the best film here this year. So it was kind of flattering to hear that, but it was disappointing that they wouldn't tell the public. But Scurus Pictures stepped up. They were an art house release distribution group, and they totally understood the film. They said, this isn't for kids, this is for college and young adult. And so we'll put it in our art house theaters. And so I said, great. And then the Disney Channel announced that they were moving the release date sooner on the Disney Channel, which ruined the theatrical release. And I actually had my lawyer, Peter Nichols, go and try to arbitrate between the two parties and see if he could get the channel to move the date back so that it would let it have a theatrical run first, and they wouldn't move. So he's still my lawyer, by the way, and is a very good one, Peter Nichols.
Oh, nice.
But that's how we met. He came up to Rebecca and me at Sundance and said, I love your movie. I'm just starting out as an entertainment lawyer. Do you need a lawyer? And I went, yes, I do. I do need a lawyer because I'm trying to get this theatrical release to happen. And so he went to bat for us, but they wouldn't move. So Scurus had to drop it, and it went on the channel. And then since it was such a tangled legal thing where Disney didn't have theatrical rights, but theatrical rights were largely gone, and it only was in the home video, then people had to just discover it. And I admit that when it was in the video stores, I would sometimes go through and look for it. And if it was it was usually in the back, and there was like Jungle Book and some other things in front of it, and I would take it out from behind and put it on the front of the stack so somebody would even see it. And so over the years, people said that they discovered it and that it connected with them. And so all these years later, which I didn't expect to happen, but I've been getting a lot of interesting letters and emails and Facebook messages and stuff from people who grew up with it, where their family did discover it either on the channel or home video. And then they rediscovered it in college and would get in touch and saying how much it meant to them. So it did find its audience eventually, which is a very sweet thing.
Same thing with the Iron Giant, same thing with A Christmas Story, It's a Wonderful Life, Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, we get it, Jordan.
Yep.
I'm running out on time.
Yeah, we are. So,
For the email.
okay, so thank you so much for joining us, Gary, and we'll talk. We'll
about something.
Well, you can if you want to do something. If I ever need you again, I'll just call you.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a whole bunch of different reasons people have invited me on to the show. I've got 22 Disney theme park attractions that I've acted as director on to date and stuff. So some people only get in touch about that, and some people get in touch about Toaster, and some people get in touch about animation days. So there's a lot of different facets of the experience roller coaster ride I've been on. So if you get interested in anything else, you can just call me back.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jerry.
All righty. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Jordan, later, guys.
Bye.